It'll be like oh, and then I'm gonna get my just in case.
So good.
My phone code.
What? Oh, yeah.
Yep.
This is how we should do a podcast, honestly.
0-0.
It's kind of potluck style, chill gathering, Q&A.
4 3s.
Yeah,
Yep.
this is the vibe. Yeah.
I kept FaceTiming you to see if you're nervous about it.
Oh no, it'll be good.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's just to unlock my phone.
Yeah, no, but earlier when you're like, if my son FaceTimes me, I could FaceTime you right now.
Oh, that's right. Oh, okay, yeah, test it. Testing.
I'm excited. It's gonna be dope.
We got lots of
I know.
Doesn't touch it.
Yeah.
Nice. I know.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yay. I love that. I don't know. I'm gonna hold this because I think I need like a little table. Yeah. Are you, Renee? Are you gonna use something? No.
It's all you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That was like too quiet. But that's okay. We'll rock with it. Why does it feel so quiet? I love it. Housekeeping. My partner's gonna walk in like around 7 to the front door and have a seat. So if somebody random walks in, that's him. Yeah, I get it's a small. It's like an intimate group, so I want to know. We'll just kind of go around real quick and just say, I'm sure you guys all know each other's names. We'll say your name. And then what, I'm so interested in what brought you to this room.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No. Well, I'm starting with you.
My name is Gabby. I guess I saw this as a form of dialogue, and I'm currently studying that specifically, and I think it's fascinating to see, the different collaborations that we can make from different perspectives. And so, yeah, here to support a dear friend of mine and, mutual friend of mine. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Cool.
Awesome. I'm Callie. I'm trying to remember how I think I saw this on Instagram through Archipelago, maybe.
Okay.
Was there maybe some sort of posting or?
I know a few of the members, so maybe they were showing some love. It's so nice.
Got me here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, no, I was really excited. I am myself exploring opening like a wellness center, kind of related to like psychedelic assisted therapy.
Yep.
Integration therapy. So I've just been kind of like diving into these types of things and newer to Denver myself. So just trying to like build a community of like-minded people who like are thinking outside the box. So yeah,
I love that. Yay.
I'm Jesse, and I'm here because my good friend Renee invited me. And she knows I love good conversation, meeting people, especially like-minded people. So I'm super excited to be here and have a great time so far.
Awesome. Yay.
I'm Renee. I'm here to support my girl, Marianne. I just know Marianne, and she's amazing, and I'm just here to support, and she's live at her first episode. It's huge, so hats off to Marianne.
Love you.
My name is Claudia, and I'm here for Marianne. The few times that I've seen you, I know how well you lead conversations. So I was already interested in the idea of, she's going to be in a podcast. For me, like that's kind of my sport. Every time I think I have a perspective about something I love, like just like seeing all the options outside of that frame of mind, and I love just creating and deconstructing everything in my mind. So I think that's like this type of conversations like I'm very much like longing for more depth, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. Molly.
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm also here to support Marianne. And when she was telling me about this, what, a week and a half ago or something, I was like, fuck yeah! I want to help anyway. Because I have this kind of dialogue with myself every day. And I try to introduce it into my intimate relationships. And so, yeah, just being part of a dialogue and conversation is just right up my alley. It's exactly how I want to spend my Thursday evening.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I'm going to go into why I'm here, and then I'm going to go, why are you here?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So my name is Marianne. Thanks you guys so much for coming. There's so many reasons that I'm here right now. I love deep conversation. I love the platonic intimacy that you get to have with like someone else's mind. That's so awe-inspiring to me that like we can even share thoughts with each other. Like, what is happening? And there was a lot of my life, I would say until my late 20s. I was with my baby daddy, and we were having a discussion, and he was so frustrated with me, and he was like, Marianne, we're on a ball floating in outer space. And I was like, oh. And it was like I went through this like portal, and I like couldn't, I was like, what the like we're on a ball. Like I had never zoomed out that much. And he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, like you're just like, I'm not okay at all. And it was this moment of like, because I grew up Christian, so I already had the answers of like what we're here, what we are, what we're doing. That was already answered for me. But in that moment, when he said we're on a ball floating in outer space, the Bible doesn't talk about that. And so I was like, oh yeah, we are on a ball floating in outer space. Like, and well, debatable if it's a ball, whatever. Do we really know? And so I was just like, damn. And then I was like, I don't think. I literally said out loud, I was like, I don't think. I don't think about this kind of stuff. I don't ask myself why I'm here, what I'm doing. I'm like going through the motions of like what a 20-something-year-old does. There was no real thought behind it. I had like regular type of jobs. There just wasn't anything that I guess inspiring in my life. And so then after that, as I'm sure all of you have had like that spiritual awakening, once I was awake to, oh my gosh, there's something going on other than what I knew, then people, places, things, ideas start showing themselves as I'm like going through the world like a baby fawn, I guess you could say, like just trying to find my footing. And which I guess I'll say one thing. I did the first drug I ever put into my body before I smoked weed or drank or anything was LSD. So, and I was 14. And that experience, I feel like looking back at it now, I'm like, that should have been the moment that I'm like, what the? But I was, I had that commercial looping in my brain. This is your brain on drugs. And I couldn't get out of that loop. So, but all that to say, I've had so many experiences now. I'm over 40, and my spiritual awakening started in my late 20s. And the more that I deep dive with people, the more that I move about this planet, the less I know. I'm like, holy crap, like I don't even feel comfortable calling myself a human. Even you were talking about this the other day, like I don't even feel comfortable calling this life, because what is it? And like digging into the language of things is like where I'm at right now. Is like we call things a certain name and we give it a definition, but that's not actually what it is. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so I think we're in this unique point in time where I'm like zoomed out. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at who the president is. Oh my gosh, look at what they're doing over here. Look at what they're doing over there. I'm like, this is a human experience happening. This is us in the human experience. And especially with the climate of social media and technology and all of the things, like it feels maybe sometimes really beautiful and sometimes really scary, or frustrating, or like, is this the way it is? And it's all made up. Every single thing is made up. And so I'm at the point now where I'm ready to have the conversations that help me to reimagine. Because if we go another 5-10 years the way it is now, because everybody thinks this is just the way it is without reimagining, without thinking of other possibilities, that would be really not fun. So Ben.
Who am I? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
no.
let me first,
Yep.
sorry. Let me say, but people are like, how'd you meet him? I was like, honestly, you came up in my algorithm. And because on Instagram, you put like the topic that you're talking about kind of really bold. And so I'd click on one after the other after the other. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is amazing. He's just like out here just like talking about everything, like not caring. Like there, you have this like ease about what you're talking about. You're like so embodied. I was like, who is this? And then I was like, that tree looks familiar. That sky looks like Colorado sky. Couldn't tell you. So I had to like scroll all the way down to find a photo that gave your location. I was like, Boulder, Colorado. Okay, great. Let me message you and see. And I had this like long thing because I was like, oh, hopefully he wants to do my podcast. Like, I'd love to do your podcast, period. And I was like, oh, that was easy. That was in August, and we knew it was going to be end of the year, beginning of new year. But when we met at the park for the first time, because you never know what kind of facade people put on, and we all have one, but you don't seem to have one. Like the way that you are on Instagram is your exact embodiment in person. And I was like, this is so wild. So even more excited to have you. So thanks for being here. Now, what are you?
Right. That's exactly what happened. My name's Ben. I started making Instagram videos like last spring, just because I guess I've been on this spiritual path for a while. A lot of different flavors of spirituality, and then I kind of did a deep dive on Buddhist philosophy, like practice, specifically meditation, mixed with lots of time in the mountains and lots of various psychedelics. Also lots of music festivals, dancing, all of these ways of kind of loosening experience, breaking up the solidity of self, solidity of the world we experience, and then having Buddhism as this conceptual framework that I always came back to and fell back on. And over time, I would pick up little things from specifically Buddhism and be like, oh, that really resonates. I'm going to dig deeper. And the deeper and deeper you get in that tradition in particular, the more earth-shattering the freedom. And I got to this point where I was like, wow, this way of seeing things that I seem to have stumbled upon is deeply liberating. I've been, brought to tears off sort of the relative jump of feeling so bound to this body, this mind, to the world, to my experience, and all of a sudden really having it break. Again, through various techniques like, psychedelics are really useful. They're not the end all be all. Meditation, also very useful, not the end all be all. But really just seeing these insights with your own eyes, and then seeing suffering dissolve, seeing problems fall away, seeing the sense of self that is the focal point of all my issues, this mind that just won't stop talking and just talking shit about life, about me. How real is it? How real are these things? And then having this, again, conceptual framework that's 2,500 years old, time-tested, this time-tested conceptual framework that you just keep digging into and be like, oh, that's what I'm experiencing. Oh, that's why all this stuff seems made up. like how real are my problems? How real is, this self that we take for granted? And so just I dug deep. I had a lot of really, again, just like amazing insights. I feel really blessed in that sense. I guess what took me to that path was a lot of actual darkness and pain. And that's what really motivated me, where I was like, I can't stop until I really find freedom. And I wouldn't have it any other way, actually. So, and then I started making these videos because I see a lot of spiritual videos. I see that term loosely because I'm not really exactly sure what it means, but and I haven't seen a lot of people saying the things that have been so deeply meaningful, resonant, and liberating to me on Instagram, on podcasts even. I just haven't seen it. So I was like, I haven't seen a motherfucker like me. Also just the looseness. Usually you see Buddhists that are very austere, very, just there's a strict image of what a Buddhist is. And that was never me, never would be me. I eat too many mushrooms and go to too many music festivals, and it's just like, if I'm being honest. And so just integrating, deep Buddhist teachings on, which we'll talk about more, like emptiness, which can be a kind of scary term for some people at first, but deeply liberating, deeply beautiful, so much depth and meaning in that insight, really, because it's not just a word. Again, it's a lived experience. And yeah, so I just was like, I don't see a motherfucker like me on Instagram. And I was like, these things are like the conversations I would have just organically with people. People like, yo, do you have a podcast? I'm like, no. I was pretty anti-social media for a while because I was kind of like a big old hippie at one phase. I'm like, oh, fuck it, whatever. And then I was like, I'm just going to do this because I just don't see anyone else doing it.
Yep.
And so I just started making those videos, and other people have hit me up, really like resonating with what I'm saying, which is great because like a big part of why I made the videos, like I want to connect with people who are just curious, where they're like primed, the mind, the psyche is primed for these insights, and then to be able to just offer different ways of seeing things that lead to deeper levels of freedom, deconstruction, followed by reconstruction, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yep.
So
Amazing.
that's I guess a long-winded answer.
No, it's all good. That's what we're here. We're here to be long-winded.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that. I think too. One thing I do want to speak on before we get really into it, is as I was kind of thinking about tonight, and I know the themes that we're going to talk about and get into, and I think about the new-ish term that's out there, spiritual bypassing, because a lot of these things, these concepts, can sometimes err on that side of things if you believe in spiritual bypassing. And then of course, as I'm resonating on this, a video comes into my awareness. It's like, you can be living a different reality than someone that you can see. I'm like, okay, so we're not, in my opinion, we're not bypassing when we're talking through these different themes and concepts. It's just another one of the 8 billion realities. I mean, or how many people are on this planet? Something like that.
That sounds right to me.
Yeah. So to think that there's 8 billion different realities is not only mind-boggling, but also puts into perspective to me that like, I'm not trying to bypass what's happening to somebody else, because we're going to talk about suffering, and then we could get into themes of like, well, what about people that are experiencing war and famine and hunger and all of that? Like, they can't just like manifest and whatever their way out of it. And actually they could, which is incredible. So there's just a lot. It's just a lot. So anywho's, if it was in their awareness, if they had people around them that were rallying for them in that way, because I've starved myself having all the food in the world and knowing, but you have to like put it in your awareness, it's available to you. So just even something like that. So anywho's, very excited to dig in. So we were talking a little bit before, and I want to understand when I asked this thing that was like similar to chakras, and you said no, it's not. But
Yeah.
I want to
Oh,
start
okay.
there.
Yeah, you want to start there.
Because I know it's like, how deep do you want to go? And I was like, all the way. I was like, I hope we all get beamed up by a spaceship. That's how fucking far I want to go tonight. But I want, because I had never heard of that, whatever that thing is that you're going to talk about, and I feel like it's going to help inform more of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If we understand this like scale.
Yeah. First, I want to say thank you for bringing up the bypassing bit. And I would love to come back to that because it's huge. There's a lot of different angles we can take on it, but I want to give that a thorough explanation just to set that aside. But
cool.
So what we were talking about before we started was the jhanas.
Jhanas, okay.
So the jhanas are various levels of samadhi. So if people aren't familiar with the term samadhi, samadhi is sort of meditative absorption. So using specifically what's called a samatha is a Pali word, style of meditation of basically really stilling the mind, coming to tranquil abides. And so when you hit these levels of deep samatha that turn into samadhi, a lot of like Pali words that can be kind of confusing, but you hit the jhanas. So these states, it's basically a progressive fading of the active fabrication of the mind. So not just thoughts. When I say mind, I mean sort of all that we are, actually. Deepest essence, deepest intention. That mind is fabricating experience at very gross, obvious levels. Like, if you think your partner's cheating on you and you're just in a web of fabrications, and then that all fades away. You're like, oh, I was just making that up. That's a very gross level of fabrication. But it goes very deep to, so the first jhana, when you break into it, this deep, tranquil state of meditation, you sort of, and I've hit the first 3 jhanas in my own practice. And first you feel this kind of wave. The word is piti in Pali, but it's just sensation. It's very somatic. It's not a heady meditation. It's your whole body's kind of glowing with this feeling. And it can be like a bolt of lightning zapping you, and you just suddenly enter this, and you're like, whoa. Or it can be like very refined and come on as waves of this there's pleasantness in these waves, and that gets more refined, less fabricated as the mind gets more and more relaxed, more still, and it's not actively creating. You hit the second jhana, which is characterized by what's called sukha, the opposite of dukkha. All these Pali words, but it's bliss in a somatic sense. And I want to emphasize this is a bliss that you really can't experience in normal life. This sounds like a mystical state, and that's because it really is. But no one talks about it. People talk about mindfulness instead of the jhanas. And this teacher I love, Robert Bea, he is a scholar of Buddhism. He's like, the Buddha really talked about mindfulness very little compared to the jhanas. So you can just sit in meditation and access this deep bliss where really your whole body is glowing. It's like this, how do I describe, like a giddiness, a warmth, a just happiness from your whole body, where we usually experience like, you open a present or something, you have that moment, and it comes and it goes pretty quickly. This is like sustained, and you can sustain it for, a real deep practitioner as long as you want.
And is this all found through meditation?
This is found through meditation, and as you start to really practice these things, you can access it through like following the breath, saying the loving kindness phrases, like may I be kind, may I be loved, may I be whole, may I be at peace. Over time, the mind just starts to let go, and let go, and it fabricates less. And so the jhanas, they fade even deeper to radical equanimity. And this, in the third jhana, it really feels like you've stepped into a different place, a stillness in your breath. The breath is very still. The mind has completely faded. There are no thoughts as we would normally consider thoughts. And so that's pretty breathtaking at that point when you really hit that level of stillness. And then it refines to even a deeper level they call pure equanimity.
Okay.
Where the mind is very undisturbed. From the 4th to the 5th jhana, there's a white light that basically all practitioners experience. And I have yet to hit these jhanas. It's it's a hard practice, very, very juicy practice, which I
Yeah.
would recommend. But so then you hit the formless jhanas. This is where it starts to get pretty trippy and crazy, where it's just when the mind is not fabricating, or these are the formless jhanas. The experience, the fabrication of having a body actually also falls away. So you see, that's also too a fabrication of mind, that there is a body here separate from this. And you go into, first, it's the realm of infinite space. And this is where you don't really have an analogous experience to compare it to in the normal waking mind. That becomes less refined. It turns to the realm of infinite consciousness. Again, even more refined, you can't even really say there's space here. And then more refined to the realm of infinite nothingness. Then the 8th jhana is the realm of neither perception nor non-perception. This is where it gets really trippy to be like, what are we even talking about? And it's so you're not.
We just go.
Yeah, right. So you're not perceiving a thing, but you're not perceiving a thing. Again, I don't have direct experience of this. I'm just fascinated by it. I've heard it described as the mind falling, and it's not fixing on anything. Where the mind is usually finding, light, Marianne, building a sense of self, pain, whatever. It's not landing. And then, so again, this is really hard to describe, but this is just, again, when the mind is fabricating less, just really letting go. And then you can go even deeper to that, to what's called the cessation of consciousness. So a lot of people in spiritual circles think, what we are is consciousness, we're awareness. And that's a beautiful, liberating insight. It can, to see yourself as more than this body and mind is deeply skillful. But from the Buddhist frame, when you really see the jhanas, it's not the endpoint, actually. Seeing that when we are not fabricating experience due to clinging or grasping an aversion, actually even consciousness fades. At this point, the way I kind of envision it is like subject and object have merged. And you can't really describe this place where the world, as we know it, is dependent on a seer, us to witness. And the subject is dependent on a world to be relative to. If I'm just in the void, well, there's no me. I need to be relative to a world. So when those two merge, where are we? And it's hard to even put words to. It's almost ineffable, actually. You can't really speak about it.
Yep. So,
and you see, this is an experience you can have through meditation. Just when the mind is so relaxed that clinging actually releases. And the world fades, self fades, mind fades, everything, consciousness actually also fades. A body fades, just through this progressive unfabricating, through just not clinging or pushing away. And so this is very technical language. It's a practice that can be practiced. I mean, is such a resource. People in the West are just getting onto it.
Yeah.
But when you can just tap into bliss or peace on demand, when that's a practice that you have in your arsenal, what happens to your quest for material pleasure, for instance? What happens to my quest for security when I can tap into real, deep, unshakable peace from sitting and following my breath or doing metta? How does that change your relationship to this place? And so that's where I come from when I say, I know you want to talk about the void. So from this lens, it's not just a conceptual understanding, it's a practice. And this is not just a mental place, this is a somatic, full experience of touching into these places and then coming back. And no drug can take, I don't know, 5-MeO might be able to get you pretty close, but I can't say that with certainty. But again, what a superpower that almost nobody knows about. And so that's what like really gets me off now.
Yeah.
It's just this practice, telling people about it, and not just the practice, but the conceptual framework of what's going on.
Right.
Seeing that what actually creates the experience of a self, a world, a body even, is actually deep clinging, resistance, deep clinging and aversion, deeper than the conscious mind actually knows. It's the way I see it, the mind moves so quickly, we can't even really see most of what's going on. And we're clinging, averse to little pains or little experiences or little awkwardness or whatever it is that's reaffirming my sense of self, my experience, my problems so fast. And so meditation is useful just to slow down the mind, to see, where am I holding on? When you see you're really not holding on to anything, you fade to the ineffable, wordless cessation of consciousness. So that was a lot.
Yeah.
But I know. So I'm curious where you want to go with that. Yeah.
I mean, just listening to all that takes me to so many different places in my own mind of like, well, how is that useful? We can't all just be
Mhm.
walking around in the no consciousness. We could.
I don't know, honestly. I don't know how it really
we
works.
could. We can do anything. Because what would happen? Because then it's like, okay, then it brings up maybe a fear. Oh my God, what
Oh,
if
yeah.
everybody tapped into these states and like I didn't feel anything? But like the experience of it has to be, maybe it's not, but is it a feeling? So overall, when I hear this, I'm like, whoa, I cannot believe that's available to us.
Yeah.
That's where like the excitement for me comes in, is like, this is an experience. This is something I've never tried, heard of, done, and it's available.
Yeah.
Okay. But then in practicality, like what is practicality? How can we go to these places? Like, as far as you've gone, like you said, to the third, like, do you feel like you hit that space and you're being sucked out and then you can't access it till you're back in? Or do you know where it like lives in your self-consciousness, what no self, whatever, wherever that stuff lives? Does it feel like an energy?
Yeah. So there is definitely an energetic quality to it. And so the jhana practice I found is it really is dependent on conditions.
Okay.
The conditions of my mind, the condition of my day, the conditions of just where I'm at a given time, to be able to have a certain amount of energy, liveliness, and also a certain amount of relaxation is not the best word, but an ability to really let go. And it's like when the conditions are right, I can tap into the second, sometimes a third jhana just at a red light. Just look at a sign and just you're there. And it's then other times I'll sit in meditation for 45 minutes and I'll just be trying, following the breath, doing the phrases, and no jhanas. So it's dependent on conditions, but the more you do it, the more you know how to access that. More you need, maybe I need to like try a little bit less actually meditation. Maybe I need to focus a little bit more on the breath. But it's really like an art. Maybe I need some loving kindness right now to loosen things up. And it's like just realizing, what do I need to let go? And again, let go isn't maybe it's an art. It's not maybe the best way to phrase it, because words are tricky. But
words are tricky. We're gonna get into that next.
but it's a practiced art, and once you get into it, you could say at first the jhanas you're attuning to the subtle body. So, and a lot of people don't actually have an awareness of that yet. I think people are catching on to it through meditation, breathwork, yoga, psychedelics, to what the subtle body actually is. For instance, if I'm angry, there's an agitation, maybe a tightness in the chest, maybe I feel this restlessness over my body. But you start to be able to attune to that and be like, what does it need right now? And you also start to see the spectrum of, for instance, the solidity of self and of a body, where sometimes it feels very solid. That's like when I don't really have access to the jhana. It's not better or worse, just sometimes it's solid, and then sometimes when I have access to the jhanas and things are more fluid, things get this kind of electricity is not the best word again, but it's a sort of vibratory quality of that piti, and then that these waves of just bliss is actually the word for it. It's just bliss, happiness, and yeah. So the biggest thing is just this is a practice, and it's accessible to everybody, and that's the thing. That's what's so breathtaking. And again, not just to access the bliss, but to have that change this world that I'm walking through, to where I can come back. I don't have to be in the cessation of consciousness to be deeply liberated. I just have to see it, and I have to see what causes the cessation of consciousness, or to go through the spectrum of the jhanas, and what causes me to experience this world. Just my degree of clinging. And clinging, at a high degree, when I'm clinging to a lot, like I want these people to like me, I want to look like this, I want to do this in my life, I want to have this freedom, security. When I'm clinging to a lot, life gets really hard. And I create problems, actually, through holding on tightly. And that clinging, that aversion kind of increases a sense of solidity. And this gets kind of trippy too, but the more I cling, the more I make something real and solid to cling to. So, and yeah, for instance, the more I want to have a good conversation with you, the more, for instance, I could make real and solid this sense of self, this identity of Ben. I make it real, I make it solid, because Ben wants to have a good conversation through clinging to a certain outcome. When we open, we let it go, everything becomes more fluid, where this sense of self that felt so real, so solid, seems to just kind of become fluid.
Yeah. So if any of you struggle with like negative self-talk or like really fearful thoughts, or is that something that this practice can like help with?
So definitely. I mean, so the jhanas are kind of a deeper degree of, again, samadhi, meditative absorption, where before you hit that, you're going to work with the mind. You're going to work with the shitty, self-deprecating thoughts. You're going to work with fear. You're going to work with pain. You're going to work with trauma. You're going to work with, again, because the trauma and fear, for instance, the more I push those things away, the more real I make them, actually. So until I can open to my trauma, open to my fear, and what a time in 2025 to open to fear. Because really we have no choice, really. We either numb forever, or we look these things in the eyes. Look the end, our mortality in the eyes. Look, the end of everything we know is a possibility. How do we relate to that? Because the more that we push that away, the scarier that monster becomes. And until we open to it, look it in the eyes and say, like, so what? Like, honestly, so what? Where are the problems? Before I make them through my aversion. And when I open to it again, these fears and traumas become much more fluid, workable. I can create actually beauty and meaning out of that which I'm afraid of, as well as that which hurt me, deeply wounded me.
Amazing. Yeah. If anyone was wondering, this is why I want robots to take over, so that like we can all just do this kind of stuff. So I don't have to like.
That's valid. I like that.
I don't want to have to clean my own house. I don't want to have to make my own money. I don't want to have to do my own laundry. I don't want to have to do anything except for connect with the inner landscape and what is available to me as a quote unquote human. Because there's so much, but I get so fucking busy and I have a to-do list, 6 miles long. And it's like, well, when do I have time to like get to these deeper places?
Right.
But you make the time, obviously. And if everyone or subcategories of people were thinking about how do I make the time to experience this, the world would be a lot different. But I think there's pockets of people that are like, okay, how do I create a passive income? Just kind of bring us back into reality. Creating a passive income is going to help you free your time to experience these concepts and ways of being. So that's dope. Let's talk about everything is made up. And kind of what, when you hear that, when you hear those words, because I was tripping out one day and I was like, that cup's made up, the plants, like the air purifier is made up, the candles made, it's all made up. It all comes from someone's imagination. Everything I'm wearing, every hair product, every single motherfucking thing is made up. It's all, and like some of it's like planted. We plant it even. Like it's all made up. And it was so like, it just made everything seem so trivial. I was like, well, if it can be made up, then it can be reimagined. And that's when I was like, I'm non-binary. And so I've been on this non-binary journey because the word she is made up. The biology of a human is made up. Chromosomes, when I'm trolling and someone's arguing with me about XX and XY online, I'm like, well, but the word biology is made up and what it means is made up. And the biologists made up that XX was this person and XY was this person, and that's all made up. But that doesn't mean that's what it is. It's made up. And so I'm reimagining for myself just to try it on. Right? It's all made Okay.
I just want to clarify. I want to ask a clarifying question. What do you mean when you say made up?
I look at it more of like what I can like see with my eyes, what I'm experiencing, like the 40-hour work week or having a job or money's all made, like the government, all the different pockets of society, like these are all made up. And we're all like agreeing to it. Like we're all agreeing that the definition of human is what it is. Like I just want to start there. Like somebody get rowdy about that, because I feel like these words create resonance, and then we hear about human limitations when actually that is just made up. And they're like, but we only have 2 eyes and we can only, do this and that. But like there's medical miracles happening all of the time. People that are like pushing their humanity, like in sports and different extremes, like we're crossing the boundary of what it is to be human all of the time. So I'm like, can we just like throw that little definition away and like stop talking about human limitations and actually talk about what might be available to us?
So recognizing that all things are, in your words, imaginary. It makes me think of a quote by James Hillman, which is, reality, this is generally the quote, reality as we know it is just a fantasy that we've forgotten is a fantasy. So that includes the idea of human, the idea of this thing called Earth, of the universe, of everything science has proved. This is still imagination. This is still imagination that we have forgotten is imagination. It's so indoctrinated into the world we're walking through, where, again, this is the power of the mind to fabricate experience. When I fabricate, I'm a human. I'm Ben. I'm doing this. I'm on Earth. I'm in Denver right now. These are, in Buddhist terms, empty notions. They don't exist from their own side. They depend on the mind. They depend on the mind to exist and for us to actually experience them. So in recognizing this, it can be, again, really scary at first for a lot of people to recognize that there is no ground here. There's nothing objectively existing, again, from its own side. And at first it can be scary when you're like, wait, so what's real? What am I? What's going on here? And then you start to acclimate to those waters. That's the way I put it. You really just get used to it, where it's like you get used to being in free fall. And all of a sudden you're not grasping for something to save you anymore, because you've acclimated to, oh, there's nothing really real here. And that's where so this actually takes me to the spiritual bypassing. So when we say everything's imaginary, does that mean someone's suffering is not real? Does that mean someone's pain and anguish, terror, tragedy is not real? If you say with certainty that it's not real, that is bypassing, and that's it can be just cruel and disconnected also. But there's a difference between saying that's not real to saying that's imagined, that's empty. You can say those things and still grant that experience is real. Where I could say the bliss that you feel in the jhanas, the happiness, the liberation you feel, is also equally imaginary, but felt as real as this. But again, when you realize there's nothing solid, real here, that it starts with imagination, that it depends on our mind and the state and quality of our mind at a given time, that frees things up. Where suffering can be seen as a real experience, but it is dependent specifically on clinging, grasping, aversion to experience. And that does not mean if someone is clinging or very averse, saying this is not okay, I don't want to feel this, it's not okay that my loved one died, and they're suffering, it's still real. It's real. It's still a felt, lived experience. But it's just dependent on that clinging, where if someone were to let go and say, it is what it is, it was their time, that way of seeing things actually reduces or can completely eliminate suffering, anguish. So again, the question at that point becomes less what is real, what is true, more what is useful when we see through the imaginary nature of everything, how it's all dependent on us actually.
I think that is most important when we think about like when someone, if you took an axe to my arm, and I'm just like, well, everything happens for a reason. That could feel weird, but it could also be a way of like, I don't want to say dealing with it, but having a different experience around it. I think of one of my favorite quotes of the Bible because it's so mystical, is when Jesus is on the cross, I believe, and he says, "Do what you want with the body, for I am not here." I was like, whoa, where are you? Right? And now I have a little, I don't know, like a little bit of a better understanding. Do what you want with the body, for I am not here. I was like, dang, that is some like magical shit, because we cling to the fact that we're here.
Yeah. And the more that we cling to me here, the more I create something solid seeming, something solid appearing, something real to cling to. In Buddhism, it's they're dependent arisings. When I cling, I create something solid to cling to. And when I let go, the solidity fades too. So you see how the mind is, when I cling to this body, this form, death gets really scary because I cling to it. It's very solid. So death feels like I'm getting shattered into a million pieces because of the solidity. When I let go of clinging to this form, clinging to this, everything I know, we enter fluidity, and then death, pain, ego death, changes of self. It's like a hammer hitting water, or even a gaseous state, depending on how much letting go is occurring. And it's hard to shatter when we're not holding on so much. And that applies to everything. That applies to self, that applies to world, that applies to anything that can invoke an experience of suffering is empty. And it's actually dependent on our clinging. So the more that we can look our fears, again, traumas in the eyes, really make eye contact. And I mean that literally with your whole being. Shine that light of awareness on that which is causing you pain, whether it's fear or trauma, and it fades. Shine the light of awareness on darkness, wherever it is, and you'll see there's nothing there to be afraid of. We create something to run from by turning our back. If you look at fear, trauma, as well as actually physical pain too, you see physical pain. You see this in meditation retreats, especially when you're sitting 8 hours a day for a week, just staring at a wall. Yeah. You'll feel pain in your knees, pain in your back. It's just a very painful experience. And you notice the more I'm like, this fucking sucks, the louder the pain in my knees gets. So even physical pain, when I open to it, I'm like, fuck it, I guess it is what it is. I'm doing another 3 hours of meditation today. When I just say, fuck it, that pain actually starts to fade too. And you see that it's not necessarily the sensation, it's the aversion to that sensation that flavors it and actually amplifies it. And that reminds me of a quote by one of my favorite Zen teachers, Shinzen Young, which is, our experience of suffering equals pain multiplied by our resistance to that pain. So pain in some form is going to come in life, whether it's emotional, physical, or probably a combination of all of them, given times. Pain will happen, but it's our resistance and aversion, saying this isn't okay, I don't like this breakup, heartbreak, feelings, that is going to amplify our subjective experience of suffering. And so when we recognize this, if we really can lower our resistance and relax and open to anything coming at us, you'll notice that maybe the experience happens, maybe my partner leaves me, maybe, someone I love dies, but the suffering associated with that becomes much more manageable, where it's nothing I have to run from. And this works as a feedback loop, where the more I open, the more I'm not afraid to open more. More. I can just open to everything that life is throwing at me. And all of a sudden I realize there's nothing here to actually run from. Nothing. It's the fact that I'm turning my head and saying this isn't okay that creates something that is amplifying our suffering. So.
Yeah, that's so interesting because just being in this reality, like there's so many things that I could be afraid of, and so many things that I could amplify, and so many things that we could generally freak out about. And there's different narratives. Like if we're not freaking out about that stuff, then we're a part of the problem. If we're not freaking out about that stuff, then the solutions will never come. But just kind of experiencing this conversation, I'm like, let's slow way the fuck down. Let's slow down. Let's restrain, and not like I'm going to do this, but restrain from sending all my friends memes with like the different political scene things and things like that, and really say, okay, but what can we do, or how can we feel around it, or what is available to us? Because there's a lot of like clinging and pointing out what's going on, and eensy weensy little teeny bit of what is available to us to experience what's happening differently.
Mm-hmm. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So, I mean,
so I hear what you're saying. So it comes back to that sort of bypassing conversation, which is there is clearly injustice in the world. And almost to change the narrative so drastically would be to deny the fact that there is inequality, and to almost again bypass. We're escaping. We're escaping the fact that there is injustice in the world, and that is, I think, in a mature practitioner, that would not, you would not stay in that bypass state. To someone who is just really having a hard time, really suffering, when they taste another narrative, they'd be like, "Oh, I found it. I'm just gonna hang out here." But if you stay there long enough, and I've had this experience, it's not the place to stay forever, actually, because it's not real. In Buddhism, there's sort of there's a wheel of existence, which goes from like the hungry ghost realm to the hell realm, animal realm, human realm, demigod, and God realm. So the God realm is sort of described as, and these are just wheels of existence, so in different incarnations or in this lifetime too. You experience these phases, these places, and you would say the God realm is actually detached from the suffering of the world, thus detached from compassion, because they've maybe applied emptiness, knowingly or not, to inhabit a different world, a different view, and thus are just leaving others to suffer in pain. And from the Bodhisattva ideal in Mahayana Buddhism, one of the three main schools, I am not free from suffering. I'm not really enlightened unless everyone else is, all beings in creation, actually.
damn.
Until they're free, I'm not, because what I am is dependent on them. The way they see the world influences me. It's sort of like blockchain technology, how everyone's worldview is constantly reaffirming each other's. If I go to, a real old school Midwest church on a Sunday, that's an interesting, different worldview than if I go to Burning Man.
Yeah.
And so our sense of self, our sense of world is constantly being reaffirmed by everyone else's. So really, how free can I be if everyone else is not? So I say this and bring it back to the bypassing conversation. When we really see the emptiness of suffering, of world, of self, of any narrative, of any phenomenon, we are not afraid to actually approach the suffering of others. In fact, in Buddhism, they say the enlightened ones go towards the suffering because they're not afraid. They see it for what it is. It's almost like one teacher, Andrew Holachek, says, it's like seeing a bunch of your friends like at a sleepover and they're all having terrible nightmares and like writhing in pain, and you just want to wake them up. You don't run out of there because they're having a nightmare. You see, oh, there's a certain way of seeing things, a certain perspective, a certain narrative, story, belief that may be deeply ingrained that is causing someone to really suffer. And again, it can seem very heady, but for me, it's very direct, where it's like if I see a homeless guy on the street, like shaking, if my heart is open, I feel that. I feel shook. I feel pain. I'm like, what the fuck is going, like, what do we do here? How do I help this guy? It's almost like, and you see it, it's like if there's homeless people, like, who die all the time. I'm sure there's some last week that passed away in Boulder. It was pretty cold. And we just look the other way. And we have to actually close our hearts Not that that's a judgment call. It's difficult to stay open to feeling that pain. But when you have this liberated psyche, liberated mind to see any view, any perspective, any experience is empty of inherently existing, I can move towards the suffering and the injustices in the world with freedom, not being afraid, not being actually with not as much pressure. I don't have to solve it. I don't have to. But from that place of really being open and relaxed, I can optimally perform for the benefit of all beings, basically, for the benefit of those who are currently suffering. So the bypassing, I see it as it can be a common like milestone, because when someone first is like, oh, I found a way better way of seeing this, and then they just disregard everyone else.
Right.
And that's, for someone who's deeply in pain, that seems natural. You know what I mean? Great, but that's not the end. The end is where you can see.
What is the end, Ben?
Yeah. I don't know if there is one. For me, it's
Okay.
when you see all of an appearance as sort of transparent. It's it appears, it feels real. My sense of self, it feels pretty real, but you see, it's dependent on assumptions, beliefs. It's dependent on narrative stories, like the sense of self, for instance. Thoughts arise, the body feels things. There's narratives in the head, like people relate to me in a certain way. That does not inherently apply that there's a Ben here, inherently. We make that assumption. That's an assumption. Like, well, yeah, there's thoughts. Okay. There's thoughts that say Ben, that experience Ben. There's a felt sense. Like, for instance, in a room full of people I've never met before, there can be a very pronounced sense of self. Or if I'm in the woods backpacking for 5 days, there's no people, the sense of self is very different. So
Right.
What's the real self? It's dependent on conditions.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Gosh, it's. We were also talking about this earlier of like, with like, this is so good and so amazing, and I feel so connected to the things that you're saying, but then for some people, it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like someone, and we did a race, or Molly's like, did you see the comments I had to erase before? Maybe you saw them, and I was like, someone was hating, and they were like, this looks like a Trustafarian event, and I was like, and I was like, well, I'm glad that I present rich, but for whatever reason, but it's those type of people that are like, who cares? And you guys are just talking. This is a never ending, you're talking in circles. This isn't going anywhere. But from my perspective, when the more that I know and the more that I experience within myself, it changes my energetic frequency. It changes my energetic vibration. It changes the way people receive me. It's been so like in my face the last year, because like I remember I was at a brunch. It was a very proper brunch, and I told the woman next to me, like, oh, I'm non-binary, and she spit out her food, and she like took her napkin. She goes, oh my gosh. She's like, okay, well, I just don't get it, because if we all don't call a tomato, then like, how would we know what it was? And I'm just thinking to myself, like, well, first of all, I'm not a tomato, but second of all, like, maybe I am, I don't know, you guys. But second of all, it's like, how we don't know how we would name that thing if we didn't have language around it. But I think we could figure it out. I think we would know just by its energy, just by its resonance, just by it. I don't know if you guys have seen this on Instagram, but the kids that have their eyes closed and they're handed like a bean bag. One's yellow, one's green, one's orange, and they're naming it off: yellow, green, orange, and they have their eyes closed, because orange has a frequency, blue has a frequency, yellow has a frequency. They're so tapped into these frequencies that they know what it is without the word. Okay. Where was I going with that?
No, I think that's dope, and that's I mean, I could.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so for the people that are like, who cares?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say, it's one thing to, I guess, change the world you live in to make it. Well, it's one thing to deconstruct the world. Let's say if you have ever been afraid in your life, if you've ever been a victim, if you've ever felt less than, if you've ever felt isolated and disconnected, these teachings would be useful. I would say that with absolute certainty.
Mm-hmm.
These teachings and not just the teachings, not just the conceptual framework, but the practices designed to get you there. And so that's the thing with Eastern philosophy and Buddhism in particular is the Buddha never was like, just trust me on that. He has a phrase in Pali called, where that is, ehipassiko, which translates as, come see for yourself. So it's like, oh, you want to see that everything is imagined. Don't just take my word for it. Here, let me give you some practices that if you engage in them, if you're disciplined and determined, and you have a good teacher to ideally speed the process along, then you will see it too. And at that point, you don't even have to, who cares what I say? And that was what really turned me onto that tradition. And then you really find the teachers that really resonate with you and go deep as you want to go. And you'll find these practices that really start to actively deconstruct. And from that place, again, so really, again, if you've ever felt suffering, if you've ever felt, general suffering, and if you've ever had the inclination that this world might not be what it seems, if you've ever had that deep feeling where I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't feel right, which I think many people have had, whether they've said it or not, it doesn't feel real, right? Like something
2020.
off. Yeah, right. So
that did not feel real.
If you ever had that inclination, then we're just understanding that these practices are designed to deconstruct any notion of reality at all, to give you that real, and it's a liberation. It's not something stale. It's not something meaningless. It's deep freedom. And with that comes beauty and actually just a mystical quality of this. It appears to be so, but it's dependent on here. What even is this, and how deep does this go? These are questions that need to be asked, and it's a path that can be difficult because there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of groundlessness, you don't have that comfort. It's not cozy. It's a hard path to walk sometimes, but if you're something in your being, you could call it the soul, if you're deep in your bones, you know that things can be really different. And just sitting with that, opening that question, and then seeing where you're guided, you will get to that place of everything is, as you said, made up, imaginary, in a sense, and also in a weird sense, kind of real. It's where it gets to be paradoxical. These words kind of fall away. And then, like we've talked about before, we get to that point of reconstruction. So we can't just stay in this liminal space of nothingness. I mean, you might be able to, but there's so much potential in reconstruction. So if we created beliefs, narratives, and stories that caused us so much suffering, so much sense of disconnection, isolation, so much sense of lack, fear, we created those stories. And once we deconstruct them, wait, how beautiful can we make it? How much depth, how much richness, how much meaning can I give this life? And it starts internally, and it by nature is organically will affect the world around us. It's where, who knows, instead of just skylines, we construct monuments, temples like the world has never seen, things that evoke awe, wonder, just that breathtaking reverence. It starts internally. The people that have built the Taj Mahal or the Sistine Chapel or Notre Dame, what was their internal state like when they were building it? How much divinity was coming out of them? Just noticing. So that's just architecturally. But how about the way we treat each other? When we see, oh, it's all empty, we're all have that same ineffable spark, that mystery, where what we are doesn't seem so different. The same spark of life that's seen your life and all the hard times, successes, failures, whatever, is the same spark that's seen through my eyes, but just different body, different experiences. So really, how different are we? And when we start to see each other, maybe not as humans, because that's an empty term, we can start to see each other as angels, as really, if we just tried that on, see everyone in this room as angels instead of humans, what happens to the heart? It starts to change things. And this is a practice. It's a neural pathway. You could use that scientific term or phrase. And if we strengthen that neural pathway just with practice and community, we can really see others as angels. That's just one possibility. And what happens to how we treat each other? What happens to taking care of that homeless dude on the street where he's an angel? He's actually me. And this is just what happens when we start to pick different ways of seeing things. Is things start to shift from the inside out, and all of a sudden the world I'm walking through is very different. And for me, I don't think there's an end. I don't think there's a limit to the amount of beauty the psyche is capable of constructing. The amount of, and maybe not just freedom, maybe not just a pleasant experience. Maybe even there's a place for something that would be classically dark, a place for tragedy, a place for real tears, guttural screams, a place for that. And in this time, if we see this as art, we see this world, this the looming apocalypse of many flavors coming our way. Whatever happens, I don't know. But if we view it with an artistic lens, see us, as angels, then how does that change the events themselves in our experience? So this is an open question for me that I've been practicing a lot with to see what happens if we see it like this. Where does it go? What happens to the heart? What happens to the energy body? What happens to my vision? And again, this is at the level of perception where the world that we're experiencing changes. it really, what we think is just here, again, it doesn't exist independently of our own minds. Our minds are flavoring everything. And that does not mean that it's not real. We created a limited, solid world that is, again, causing us suffering. And that started in the mind. And now it's the world most people are walking through. So we can deconstruct and reconstruct a world where, again, through the 5 senses and perception, we are experiencing whatever we want. Beauty, transcendence, again, deep connection, deep reverence for that which is beyond us. So for me, I was going to say the sky's the limit, but there is no limit in sight.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay. I need a cigarette. I don't smoke. Molly, how are we doing on time? So, or what time is it? Sorry. Oh, beautiful. So, right, that went by fast. So again, coming back to the who cares, or what are you guys even talking about, or okay, now that I know this, now what? And I did ask, she was an elder in a Native American tribe, and we were all on this Zoom, and I was like, now what? It was like, I felt like I didn't know where to go. She goes, well, share what you know. And I was like, oh, right. And I'm in a lot of like boss babe, women empowerment groups. And in those rooms, the amount of, I'm afraid to be seen. Nobody's going to care what I have to say. Nobody's going to think that what I have to say is important. All of those limiting beliefs are so strong. And so when I think about her saying, the elder saying, and now you go share it, and then you have to go through the muck of like your childhood and like that ex that thought you were fucking stupid and like friends that betrayed you and you have to crawl through all of that just to be heard or share what you know. I wish there was a quicker way, because I know that I believe that, because we're living in 8 billion different realities, that everybody has something so important to say. Everybody has something that they don't even, because like something you say could spark something in one of you, and that could create something that we've never seen, heard, felt, experienced before. That's wild to me.
Mm.
But if you're like, everybody thinks I'm stupid, and we never get to hear that thought,
Yeah.
I'm like, dang it. I just have to believe that it all happens the way it should. But coming back to these types of conversations, I feel like it's important because we could say like, oh, nobody cares about us. Like nobody's going to care what we have to say. Just as easily as the next person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully by people seeing us just fucking doing it, like we're just babbling about each other, like in awe and wonder and like excited about, you know, learning and experiencing. And also I'm in circles where people haven't even had their spiritual awakening, quote unquote spiritual awakening. They don't even know what's available to them. They don't even know about meditation. You know, obviously my algorithm is like, oh, everybody's a sound bowl healer. I am. Everybody is a DJ, whatever. Like everybody does this, everybody does that. But like, no, there's so many people that don't know that other thought is available to them, or to let go of past conditioning is available to them. They just, it's not in their awareness yet. And for me, that was like, even, you know, 20 years back, it was like, that was the most exciting thing when something brand new was put into my awareness. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that existed. That's, and it does, but I didn't know. Like, that's crazy. So I think kind of my question to you is, where are you going with all of this? What? Yeah. What are you doing?
That's a great question. I don't know. So for my whole
Perfect.
thing, I couldn't tell you. I want to speak on a few things of what you said, but for me, again, so in my bones, knowing this is something that for me has been insanely transformative at all levels of my life, not just, you know, transcendence, but the way I relate to self, the way I'm able to post videos of me blabbering about who the fuck knows and just put it on Instagram. I'm not afraid, like, because again, whose self are people poking fun at if they do? Their idea of who I am, my idea of who I am. Who are we talking about right now? Like, it's just all empty ideas. It's like, okay, if people want to poke fun at empty ideas, whatever. And for me, it's like something so meaningful. It's like, who am I to actually? I got this multiple times, actually on mushrooms a couple summers ago, or yeah, something like that, where it was like, look at what we've given you. Who are you to keep this to yourself? Who
was talking to you?
It was,
or what was talking to you?
It's,
or
it's,
was it?
It's hard to say. It wasn't like angelic language in my mind. It was like a felt sense. It was like, look at what you have. And for me, it'd be like, I don't do Instagram, or but what if people think I'm dumb? People talk shit about me. And I always remember this quote. I think I saw it on a t-shirt. It was fear stops magic.
Ooh, yeah.
And it really does. It's that, again, when there's fear, what am I contracting around, solidifying? I'm stopping the flow of this ineffable magic place. I'm saying, and again, when I'm afraid, I'm putting myself in a tight little box. Who's afraid? Who am I? Am I an angel? Am I source itself? Or am I little Ben? And who says? So from that place, it was just like, there's something that's been so transformative that when I have these conversations, again, people are like, what? Like, who is this dude? And I just had enough of those, and people being like, bro, you got to start making content. Where again, it was a felt sense that kind of formulated language that was like, who do you think you are? Like, well, look at what we've given you. Who do you think you are? And I wouldn't try to name whatever that was. It's the universe, cosmos, creation, whatever. It is a feeling in my body. Whereas just like, you see how many people are in pain. You see how many people you help just organically by just speaking about what you're passionate about. Who are you to keep that to yourself? And this brings me to something you said about absolutely everybody has that in them. Not to say maybe what I'm saying, maybe yeah, but everyone has gifts that we need to learn how to work with fear so that we're not stopping the magic. Gifts of music, dance, expression, science, love, connection, whatever it is, leadership. We need you. And I mean that with everybody. In these times more than ever, we need everyone. That little voice is like, who do you think you are? That inner critic that is so conditioned in our culture. Let it go. See it as just thoughts. And what about the depths of your being? What about your soul? When you're on your deathbed, are you going to wish you just listened to that motherfucker in your head? thinking it was you, think whatever it is, your dad or some bully in high school, that voice in your mouth, whatever. Fuck it. What do you need to express? What do you need to share with the world? Knowing that that is, again, when I say soul, I mean it very loosely, very broadly, not in like any dogmatic sense, but what is your soul craving? That until you do that thing, until you give that thing, nothing's gonna cut it. It doesn't matter the money, it doesn't matter the partner. It's just, I have something to give, and it could be anything. There's no limit on it. Again, arts, love, connection, support, care, poetry, whatever it is, and that's like, we need that.
We need that, and I as many people as I've talked to, that I do a lot of oracle readings also, and everybody comes to me for love, money, and purpose. And in the purpose front, they're like, but I haven't found it. And I'm like, please fucking talk about that. Talk about how you haven't found it. Talk about how you don't know what you're doing. Talk about what you're doing now. Talk about the rooms that you're trying to put yourself in and the thoughts that you are having. But please talk about that. And if there's a frustration, or if you're comparing yourself to other people, or whatever your process is, you're like, I haven't found my purpose. I feel like everybody's already found their purpose. I'm like, no, like I've done 20 oracle readings and literally nobody knows what their purpose is. And I don't believe I feel like for some people, yeah, there's a solid one purpose. For some people, it's multiple things. And for some people, I'm like, more conversation around not being able to find that thing. Because I think even that can lead to roads that we don't know about. But like, who said it? Kanye West. He was talking about how he's the first to admit it. Like, be the first to admit it. Like, get that conversation. And it like, and then people can be like, oh my gosh, whatever in the comments, or, if you put it out in a book and nobody buy, or whatever. But like, just please, more dialogue around not knowing.
Yeah.
Because now we have, be the expert and make sure people see you as the, is it the expert? Yeah. Make sure people see you as the expert. Make sure you're showing up online in this way or that way, or, and it's not everybody's calling, obviously, to show up online. But for the people that feel a calling to, but again, they don't know what their purpose is, I'm like, please just start talking about that. Because there's people at every level. There's people that will go, you're literally getting on here every day saying how you don't know what you actually want to do. And that's, to me, that would be so interesting.
Yeah.
But what is your process around it? And then, maybe you get invited to go somewhere because you're talking about how you don't know what you want to do. Or we talked about this at the park, trying things on. I think let's close with that kind of around that topic, because authenticity is this buzzword in the online space, and it is so confusing to me personally, because what was authentic to me in the 90s, I look back and I'm like, whoa, that was crazy, insane. I think we all just had like an outfit that we wore that popped into our mind. Or like things that I've said in the past when I was just like, again, not in my like quote spiritual awakening, and thoughts that I would think when we think about old versions of ourselves. And now there's this like, oh, don't show up and don't put yourself out there until you're authentic. And you're like, authentic?
Yeah. I mean, it's an empty term. Who's authentic? Am I authentic? You're authentic? Who's authentic are we talking about? And so with that, again, it's less about what's real, what the real authentic is, more about what feels right. Again, there's something so deep, like, again, the soul in your bones. How do the spirits, how do the angels want to express through you? Don't hold back. If you want to flex on whatever outfit, do it. Who fucking cares? That's authentic for the angels right now. Again, this is where ego and, again, depths of soul become very murky. What one person will call, that's just egoic. What if that person is just egoic, that he wants to speak on Instagram? What if that's the depths of, for instance, my being? It's like, hey, I don't feel complete unless I share this. Who's authentic? your empty notion of authentic, my empty notion of authentic.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, again, what we're left with is just trying things on, whether it's outfits or different senses of self, different ways of relating to others in the world. All we're left with is just different ways of trying things on. Try on a sense of self. Maybe I am this guy. How does that feel? Maybe I'm not a loser. Maybe I'm not limiting myself. Maybe everything happened for a reason. Maybe. Not that that's objectively real. It's just an outfit. And we get to try it on, see how it feels. And we can put on a different one tomorrow. Because none are objectively real. Authenticity and the lack of authenticity is like grasping at straws for something more real. In this place where everything is imaginary, whose real are we talking about? And from that place, we can let go, not hold back the storm surge of soul that's coming through all of us. It's again, we build the dam to say, oh, but I'm not authentic. Look at that. Open that. Break that dam and see what comes through. We might be surprised by the power, the strength, the divinity that's already there when we're not making ourselves small and contracting. But yeah.
Well, and think of how long you might hold on to things, stay in that relationship, stay in that career, stay in that way of being, because this is who I've told people I am authentically.
Yeah.
I haven't told anybody shit about me. So I can be whatever I want at any given moment. And that feels pretty good. And so I guess with that, let's open up to questions. I think we have to pass the little fuzzy microphone. It's actually really fun to talk through. But we'll keep one for us.
Okay, cool. Do you want to keep it?
I'll pass.
Okay.
I'll pass. Molly.
Yeah. Based on lots of questions, lots of conversation, but based on the last part here, and this came up a few times for me, I actually struggle with, first of all, thank you, because one of my things is that, I'm not big enough, I'm not doing enough, but I think about this. I think about the world, I think about myself, I think about my relationships in this type of framework. And I didn't really necessarily know that it was, of the Buddhism tradition. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of affirming, right? And this part about it's not everyone's calling to be online. And I think about that a lot with myself. It's Molly, you're just doing the work internally, and that is enough in and of itself. And if that changes one day, cool. If it remains this way forever, amazing. But where I actually struggle with this more is why, how does this framework play into the bliss and the happiness that I can tangibly feel on the earth? The material things that you want to go after. I can totally grasp having detachment from, because and maybe that's my own experience, and that's a limitation of my own experience up until this point. I can totally grasp needing detachment from the suffering, right? And that was something that I created in my own mind. And I have a particular style of trauma and suffering that I have experienced, and that's different from someone else. But then why the fuck do I care about the number on the scale, or how much money is in my bank account, or and then the bliss and the happiness that comes from all of that external validation, right? Whether it's external validation that someone else, whether it's Marianne telling me how beautiful I look today, or myself telling me how beautiful I look today. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? It really fucking trips me up.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is understanding conceptually the emptiness of things, but still trying to tap into that joy, that bliss you said, from things like external validation, things like money, things like looking good.
Because why else are we here?
Yeah.
Right? If we are not here to feel bliss in a way that's I can hang on to that, and now I know what that feels like, and then I can use that tangible feeling to move into the experience with the homeless man on the street, and be why don't I want to give him money? Well, it's because of my own fear around being poor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, no, and what I'm saying, I mean, it might not be a satisfying answer, but again, what we're left with is different ways of seeing things. So there's absolutely nothing inherently wrong with wanting to hit a certain number on the scale, for wanting to make a certain amount of money. Nothing wrong with that. It's if we feel trapped that I need to be here or I need to have this amount of money in order to be happy. Recognizing again the transparency of that notion that, oh, I am granting that belief power. I'm granting that I need to hit this number on the scale in order to be enough. It's fine if we do. And again, there's something very deep where there's a certain way of seeing things where it's maybe what do the angels want? This gets into more depth psychology, like Jungian archetypal stuff. What do the spirits want? Do they want to look a certain way? Do they want to express themselves like this? Do they want to have a certain amount of money? And there's no wrong answers. I'll say that again. There's no wrong answers. In spiritual circles, people think it has to be austere, aesthetic, or the renunciate image, for instance. That's very common. Just very calm, collected. That's just one image. We can be ravaged by spirit. We can be possessed. We can be in bliss and in real terror and tragedy in our lives. And the freedom comes from seeing it as transparent, not from clinging to the good, from seeing it from a lens of, oh, this does not exist. This trouble, this pain does not exist independently of my mind. It doesn't exist from its own side. It's hollow in a sense. It's so from that there's a freedom to then, if I want to, for instance, reduce my suffering, like is taught in traditional classic Buddhism, understanding what again am I holding on to? Is it the weight? Is it the image? Is it the validation? What am I holding on to? And then just listening to what you want, like really deeply want. And again, there's no wrong answers, but recognizing the only cage we're in is one that we made. And although that can sound harsh at first, it's a part of, in my, like, the maturation of the psyche is recognizing that. And again, you don't have to do anything. But if you feel trapped, just asking more of those kind of questions, like why do I feel like this? Why do I need to hit this number on the scale or have this amount of money? And just not being trapped. So it's not really an answer as far as like why or what you should do. It's more just like whatever you want, but but don't limit yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
love a mic. Well, I think, thank you both. Absolutely loved it and very deep, which is certainly something, like you said earlier, that I crave. But, I think for me, my observations are, one, we have to all understand that this is certainly a conversation that comes from a place of privilege, right? Doesn't mean we're all rich, just means we live here in America and we live here in Denver and we can have this privileged conversation. Because the reality is, if you're a 6-year-old kid in Boston whose parents just got removed by ICE, your chance of meditating tomorrow and understanding these philosophies is extremely low, right? And there are a million examples of that. My martial arts instructor used to say, Buddhists just see the matrix, for what it is, but they also tend to miss out on a lot. So I think that, in my opinion, I agree with almost everything you said, right? I've been a practitioner of similar practices for a long time, and I feel like I've come to a point in my life where I can easily calm myself. I can easily give myself joy. I can easily be grateful. I can easily be happy. But I will say it probably all is a simulation. But at the same time, that first kiss, the light touch on a hip, love, dancing, music, right? So to me, those things are equally as important as understanding selflessness, right? And understanding that maybe it is all made up, but at the same time, the reality that we have and that we know should be enjoyed, and you should help, and you should see the suffering of others, and you should do everything that you can to help that. But at the same time, life as we know it, that we perceive, is fleeting. And I love those moments. I love this moment, right?
I love those little moments. And so I have reached this point in my life of a balance between Buddhism and what you're seeking, and also loving the physical life that is available to me, and loving those little moments of dancing and being with your friends, right? And like I said, that first kiss, all those things that just cause that energetic spark, just like other things can, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you do radio? I mean, just first.
I'm a film actor.
Okay, got it. Me too. I'm like, no, it's still not as good. It's just not as good. Yeah. I love it.
I mean, I agree with basically everything you just said too. I think absolutely. I'm kind of in the same place. So little background, I guess we didn't really get into my history. I, after graduating undergrad, was really depressed, really anxious, saved up all my money to kind of be a bum in Vietnam and India right as COVID happened. Kind of got trapped in an ashram during COVID, very serendipitous. When I came back, I just worked at different Zen centers, did like some construction jobs, like very low key life, and was very much renouncing the world because I was like, all this is just suffering. There's never enough. Everything is just coming and going. It's, what's the point? And then I came to this, deep insights, freedom, and the soul, and I mean that very deeply. Like the depths of our being is like craving that first kiss, that dance, to really taste, drink this life. And it's like it almost seems sacrilegious is the word that's coming up to me to like really reject that. And that renunciate monk type path is a valid path for some. Some people really want to explore that and taste that life, but that's where it comes to be very subjective. What is in the depths of my being? What do you could say the angels want from me? And then for me it's a balance, because for me it seems like a spectrum. If I fall too far into the renunciate path, I'm missing out on so much in this life. And if I fall too far on the other side of really tasting the richness of the world, the complexity, what can I do, all that, I get lost. So hence in Buddhism, what's called the middle path between extremes. And again, it's just, what we're left with is different views, different ways of relating to the world that lead to different experiences. And being able to try on, the experience of really drinking from this world, tasting the people, the places, the experiences, and then being able to have the dexterity and the flexibility to shift to, oh, this is empty, fabricated, being able to kind of transcend when that feels right. And that does not mean we necessarily get rid of pain too. It's tasting that pain just like we taste the pleasure, to know where to find that meaning. Because I think meaning and depth is really closely linked to our own unique suffering. If you want to find your meaning, you got to find that root of our pain. So no, I agree with everything you said. And thank you for bringing that. It's quite a privilege to. I feel really, really blessed to have like this conversation, to have these practices, insights, the ability to, go to Vietnam and live like a dirtbag and go get trapped in an ashram. Like that's a crazy experience. And a lot of people don't have that. And makes me think too, there's some theory where to change the way that people relate, see things, to change something in a culture, we only need 10%, about 10% of the people to really shift their mind, to be able to really change things from like a top down. If there's a new analogous way of relating that is advantageous evolutionarily, creation will take that flow. So doing what we can to convince as many people as we can, to get them to this very open, really liberated place of relating and seeing, to be able to spread it to the world and then have that ripple effect where eventually again the dam breaks, and something really new can come.
All right, so I kind of want to I want to speak my process and then kind of get to my question. So, and talk about serendipitous. Like you were basically speaking to exactly what I'm about to ask about. A teacher of mine has, referred me to working with different narratives, like trying on let's try on the love story. Let's try on the warrior story, like all these different archetypes that we're capable of embodying. and the frequency, like the energetics that play along with that. And it reminds me a lot of Vedanta, and Jean Bodin, these different like philosophers that have contributed so much to Hinduism and Western forms of thought. And this idea of posse ipsum, which is, God is possibility. And coming from a really, really rooted Buddhist practice, seeing possibility, I've really placed it in between emptiness and form, because potential energy, possibility is present within all different systems, within time, right? Within places. So it's like, how do you see potential energy happening? And this can get into manifestation, whatever that means. But my own personal placing of what potential is in terms of that being equal to God and the divine. Like, how, I guess my question is, like, what is your interpretation of that?
Of potential and how that relates to God.
Yeah.
I think that's can be a really useful view to hold. I think, again, it kind of, I'm curious what we mean by both of those terms, actually. What do we mean by potential and what do we mean by God? So it really opens up, again, the way I see it is, for me, the freedom has come from different ways of seeing things and relating to things, more than just linguistically, but in a very felt sense, leads to different experiences. So if that phrase, as far as potential, is our connection or is the divine itself, what experience does that bring? And I'm not going to say right, wrong, or good or bad. I'm just like, it's very subjective. It's very much, how much does that tickle your soul to be like, ooh, I like that. Find that and flow with it. Because again, when all of it's empty, real, unreal is kind of irrelevant. What tickles your soul? What resonates? What lights it up? What brings that depth, reverence, beauty, whatever you want? And so, it's not a view. I think I get what you're saying. I'm not really sure. We'd have to go into it some more. But the way I see it is, if that view is bringing you expansion and depth and meaning or whatever you're really looking for, then keep playing with it. Keep playing with it, seeing how it affects, again, the world we experience, and see what happens.
Yeah.
See what happens. I mean, we've got time. Everybody can ask questions, share anything that came up for you, but obviously no pressure also.
I can share.
Claudia, I was like, I know you're more of
Give some
anything,
insight.
yeah.
What feels more present right now? First, I want to thank you, both of you, for sharing everything you have shared. I appreciate also the privilege, right? Just having the time and the access to think about these things. It's a privilege in itself. And I guess what I want to share, it's something I've learned from people that have suffered a lot. I feel that when I get into these conversations, there's this thing about, again, like detaching and everything expands, right? And what I've learned, for many years, I work with people that were trafficked, and they might not see the light for years or 20 years, or it's a deep suffering. But something that I've learned from these people is that there's this other way of, you might not have the privilege to expand, but there's something about the pain being so solid, so unbearable, that you implode. And in that implosion, you find, again, there's something beautiful in every single corner of a place with no windows. Like this sense of, like, there's something about, if you want to call it the human spirit, that can remain untouched, regardless of the situation. I think it's a beautiful thing that I carry with me. Like, yeah, you can expand all you want, but also in this very solid way of experiencing life, you can also find it, even if it's through pain. So anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's just a way of, I guess, seeing the contrast of bringing it very much to earth, and some of, like, the gravitas of the human experience can also take you to those places.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when we speak to privilege, like, thank God we're using it in a way to expand, because who knows what's going to come out of this room or any room like this that has the privilege to do it. I hope that it doesn't just remain within ourselves and the privileged groups, but somehow goes, I guess I had to experience someone changed my mind. There were several hundred things that helped to change my mind. So when I think of the impossibility, like, oh, well, we can't change their mind. Well, my mind was changed. There were several 100,000 things that happened in sequence that your mind was changed, and yours. So I think this notion of like, we can't change people's minds, we actually can. And so with the privilege that we have, and there's actually, not to like downplay us, but there's people with bigger privilege than us also in this room that are, trying to maybe reach where we're at. But I think using that to just keep having the conversations, keep doing what we're doing, to hopefully then help to, obviously my mind was ready to be changed, but help people that are along a similar, trajectory. Anybody else? Yeah.
I mean,
there's so much we could talk about, all of the privilege in the room, right? But I also think, to Claudia's point, when she talks about like the solidness of our experiences forcing our human spirit, soul, whatever we want to call it, to implode on itself, like, there's also been, I'm sure, quite a significant amount of pain experienced in this room to get us to this point where you did the work along the way, whether you knew it or not. I know that I did the work along the way, even though I didn't know it at the time, to get myself to the point where I wanted to change my mind. And so also, as much as we need to like recognize our privilege, like also recognize and like celebrate ourselves, as well. And even in my mind right now, I'm like, Molly, you sound so privileged. But at the same time, it's like, I know that I have had gut-wrenching, guttural pain, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence. So, and there's different phrases that I can use, and there's different, right? And I own that. Like I was talking to Ben before, that's on me. I chose that path. I allowed that to happen to me. I've had to dig in, but I know what that pain feels like, right? And so, yeah, I think just fucking celebrate the shit that you went through to get here to be in this room too.
Renee's a reflector, if y'all don't know human design. These are the rare unicorns of our universe. No pressure. And then
I think mine is taking it all in, and I'm aligned, and it is a lot. And I am someone that thinks inside and outside the box, and I'm always questioning and wondering. So my conversations will continue within everybody, I feel like, in this group. Definitely Marianne, Ben, I feel like it's not the last of us.
Please,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Cool.
Well, no, I feel like that.
I don't necessarily have a question per se. I mean, I think I had a lot as you guys were really diving into it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is a podcast. Like, you're the listener. Like, come on." No, but I think this is just like it was serendipitous how I found this, and so I just think this is like we like are co-creating, right? Like, yes, from a place of privilege, perhaps, but also earned privilege, right? Like, we've all been through things, and it's gotten us to where we are, and being able to like think expansively, think outside the box. So I don't know, just like kudos to you guys. I like literally I'm like wait, how did I happen upon this? And I met Molly just like a week ago, so we were like, oh, a double hit in 1 week, okay. But yeah, no, I think this is just so wonderful. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I didn't know the privilege thing was going to go that far, but I just like felt like I should be like, but I love what you said, okay? Because I definitely came from, like single mom, definitely grew up poor, you know what I mean? A lot of trauma and everything. So I appreciate what you said, because that's true too. You should be able to give yourself credit and accolades for surviving horrible things and becoming hopefully a better human, who also wants to potentially help others, even if it's just one person, even if it's just the random person you come across, or if you choose to have a podcast. So yeah, great point. I appreciate that.
And I think that's really important, to remembering that we're all kind of subject to this human experience, no matter where we come from, and which is like the entire motivation behind relating, right? And attachment and grasping. And we can like get into that rabbit hole, but it all stems from the fact that we're subject to our own possibly self-inflicted suffering, maybe collectively inflicted suffering, unconscious conflicted suffering, like we can like go down that rabbit hole. But I think that is the most deepest aspect to our humanity, is remembering like the human condition and what we all come from and what we're all subject to, and that is our deepest point of relating. And that's why we have these conversations, is because it's hitting those different focal points of our lives, and hopefully hoping that ripples out in some way, resonating to certain people in different ways, So yeah, that's what I have to say about it. Yeah. Levi Levi and I have known each other, been together for almost 8 years, and so he's seen this like on the back end of everything, of me like, oh, wildly curious conversations, I met this guy, blah. Like he saw all the everything leading up to today in my like big poofy shouldered shirt, with microphones and whatnot. I know that you walked in kind of late. Was there anything you wanted to share or talk about?
Yeah, I guess one of my questions, to go there that way. I grew up Christian, was into it when I was younger, got a little bit older and got into drugs and all that, and definitely faded away, and then tried to use, spent a lot of years, trying to practice Christianity to get, myself back together. And it was kind of a bummer that it didn't work. I feel like I tried really hard. I spent, all this time in these programs, like daily, like hitting it, doing groups like this. And I never got sober until I just did it for myself. So it was kind of like, what's really going on there? So like for me, Buddhism has always sounded very interesting. So like, question would be, Christians have a Bible, like where does a person start to read about Buddhism? Or like what's a daily mantra or some phrase that you can use to keep you on that track on like a day-to-day basis? Like Christians have, what would Jesus do? Like what can be a thing? Yeah. Yeah, where's the what would Buddhists do? Like, or just something totally different, like just something to keep you in that mindset.
Yeah, interesting. I haven't thought about that, like a phrase for Buddhism that would sum it up. There's something about symbols, I think, in Buddhism. So for me, for instance, when I see prayer flags all around or whatever in Boulder, it snaps me back into like the depths of these conversations, these knowings. I'm like, oh, right. Or seeing like a Buddha sculpture, for instance, can bring you to the deepest level of your understanding of these things. Or maybe what's more important than that is to your inclination, just a feeling of how deep it can actually get, to how free we can actually be. a knowing, and you don't have to understand it conceptually necessarily, just something that reminds you, oh yes, life is fucked right now, but there's the prayer flags in that Buddha. This is, nirvana. Actually, some teachers would say that samsara, the wheel of suffering, and nirvana are actually the same exact place, different way of relating potentially. So reminding yourself of that, remembering the neurosis in my mind and the fact that life is imploding right now, it doesn't mean we're not in nirvana right now. What is heaven? What is the sun without the rain? Recognizing maybe the polarities, how necessary they are. To feel pleasure, we need some pain. To feel found, I need to feel lost. To be free, I need to know what chains are like. So from that sense, I mean, yeah, so it doesn't really answer your question. I would say there are suttas. These are like basically scriptures from the Buddha or written right after him. There's three main schools of Buddhism: the like Thai forest tradition, the Mahayana school, like Zen Buddhism, Chan in China, and then Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism. So there's different schools that emphasize different things. I won't get into it too much. If you want some recommendations for books and places to start and teachers to look into for videos, meditations, talks like this, I will happily give. I want to give them to everyone I know. I mean, for the sake of this recorded, I would say best teacher that I found that changed my life, that really showed me this stuff, including the jhanas, including the radical understanding of emptiness. His name is Rob Burbea. You can find him online, ROBBURBEA. He has a organization called the Hermes Amara Foundation that his students set up. He passed away in 2020, unfortunately, but he kind of went into a deep understanding of emptiness, merged that later in his life with depth psychology and understanding the role of archetypes and image with that ground of emptiness. But amazing teacher. I've listened. It's almost ungraspable the way he speaks. It's so poetic, beautiful, so much emotion. And just listening to it, I don't understand a lot of what he says, but it's just like something in the being is like, whoa, what's going on right now? So I would love to, we should put links or something in this, but to the Hermes Amara Foundation. Shinzen Young is a more grounded Buddhist teacher who teaches, suffering equals pain multiplied by resistance. For instance, that was what I heard from him. And again, all these teachers have techniques, talks, guided meditations. So just once you find those things and you find that teacher that clicks for you, because it's going to be different for everybody, find that teacher who, again, speaks to the depths of your being. Find that teacher, and then it's just fun. Because when I listen to these talks, I'm having a bad day, and then I hear Rob or Shinzen talk about just a clear explanation of emptiness, or on the necessity of cultivating loving kindness and connection and the beauty of it. It's like an insight in a talk. Where it's like I could listen to the news or whatever, or I could listen to something that is bringing me freedom. So at that point, it's just like you realize, if I want to just feel insights, I'm just going to listen to these cool talks. So it's like once you get that ball rolling and you know what direction to kind of sniff in, that again vibes with you. Then it's just fun, and you just like, if you're having a bad day, you know where to turn. So yeah.
How much Netflix do you watch, Ben? 1 to 10.
Yeah. I watched almost. I never watched TV until I started seeing the girl I'm currently dating, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna watch a little bit of TV. So I've kind of let myself slide.
Netflix and chill.
I would say I've 1 out of 10. I would say like the past 3 weeks have been the first TV I've watched in quite a while, but like a 1 or 2 probably.
Okay. But. I guess also I'm just like, I mean, what is the quote? We all have the same amount of hours in our day as Beyonce. So we all have the same amount of hours in the day. I mean, of course, like him and I are raising a 13-year-old, so that takes a little, away from it. But, and you may have obligations also, but like, is this it's obviously you're going to school for it too, but like, even aside from school, is this like the majority of your free time is spent in just questioning? And like, I'm curious because like, I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like basically all I think about.
Totally.
When,
So life has its seasons for sure. And I think that there's a role for me of like really when the soul, I mean that in a very loose sense again, but when the depths of my being are like, eat this, drink this material, this is getting you where you want to be, something, again, it's hard to explain, but drink it until it's not satisfying you anymore. And then maybe I need to meet new people, maybe I need to get out of a shitty relationship, or maybe I need to go back to school, whatever it is, then follow that. And it's but drink it to the depth that you need. And again, that's a question only you can answer. And so for me at this point, like I'll throw on talks or meditations or books like when I'm driving, or if I'm can't sleep or whatever, and if I'm really suffering. There's a book written by Robert Bear called Seeing That Frees. So again, this ways of seeing are what liberate us, and that book is in my opinion, from what I found, the closest thing to a Bible for Buddhism. It's yeah, it got me to this. So I would highly recommend that. And again, just flip through those pages, and in there's like dozens of guided meditations to again show you for yourself. So at this point, last night I was just hanging out. I went snowboarding with my friends. It was my day off. I just had like a work meeting, but I went snowboarding with my friends who I haven't seen in forever, and I was like, should I prep for this podcast? I was like, should I do some reading or something? And I was like hanging out and having such a good time with my friends. We watched a movie, and I was like, no, I'm just gonna wing it.
Yeah.
And I think it worked out great. But yeah, just I would say again, listen to the depths of what you really want. If you want that transcendence, you want that freedom, you want that dexterity of mind, just know that that's available. And again, with the right resources. But then it's like if your soul wants to fucking go to Burning Man, or your soul wants to go back to school, then put your time in that. And so,
yeah, dope.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Let me go back to my seat so I can properly end this. Thank you so much for being on the first Wildly Curious conversation. I couldn't think of anything more wild or curious.
Yeah,
so.
Good. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun.
Awesome. Yay.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Molly, hit it. Okay.